Hi guys, my name is Nikhil. I work as a mobile application developer at Army Systems. I'm going to talk about React Native versus the native mobile application development. Which one do you consider while developing a mobile application? So before I step into the React Native versus the native comparisons, let me just brief you on the cross-platform frameworks available. So with the cross-platform frameworks, what you can do is like you develop using one particular language and you get to deploy your apps in different OSs, that is Android, iOS or Windows, whichever the cross-platform framework supports. So what are the different cross-platform frameworks available? The most notable ones are like React Native, Flutter, Ionic, PhoneGap, Xamarin to name a few. So how do we differentiate between all these cross-platform frameworks? So for me, the most notable difference is that if you consider Ionic and PhoneGap, they are more of a hybrid frameworks in the sense that what you get is an embedded web view within an app container. You don't get that native application feeling. So it's more like an web application that has been optimized for a mobile browser. So how does the React Native or Flutter or Xamarin difference from these hybrid applications? So what they do is like you develop using one particular language, and they use a bridging setup. So this JavaScript, or like if you consider React Native, you develop in JavaScript. So this bridge converts the JavaScript code into the native components. So at the end, what you're getting is native components instead of the embedded web views. So this enables a much better native feel. So what are our other options? That's where frameworks like React Native and Flutter comes in. What these frameworks do is like we can write code in one particular language and they bridge them to the native components. So if you take for a React Native for an example, you can write your code in JavaScript, and there's a JavaScript bridge which converts this JavaScript code into the native components. That is, if it's the in the case of iOS, the code will be converted into Objective-C, whereas in Android it gets converted to Java. So in the end, you are getting absolute native components and not an embedded web view. Out of all the cross-platform frameworks available right now, React Native and Flutter seems to be the most promising of them all. They both, to some extent, seem to have the same ideas behind them. They are both component-based architectures. Also, React Native is being developed by Facebook, whereas Flutter is being developed by Google themselves. They are also backed by some strong community of developers. They are also being used by top companies like Walmart, Alibaba, Tesla, to name a few. Choosing between these two is quite difficult, considering that where one lags, the other performs, and vice versa. For example, if you consider performance, Flutter performs better than React Native due to the fact that there is no bridge in Flutter, so the code is directly converted to the native code and it does not have to be passed through a JavaScript bridge as in the case of React Native. But if you consider flexibility, React Native does better than Flutter because in the case of Flutter, it offers widgets as components and they are limited. What is provided, you can use. Whereas coming to React Native, you can create your own components using JavaScript, and there are tons of components available. We chose React Native over Flutter primarily because it has been around for longer and has a larger community backing than Flutter does right now. Also, given the fact that JavaScript is used in React Native and whereas Dart is being used in Flutter, it's obvious that JavaScript has been here for longer and has a larger community. So if you ever run into some issues, you have a greater chance of finding the answers with React Native than Flutter does at the moment. But having said that, you have to give due credit to Flutter, and it's a serious contender in the coming years. So guys, coming back to our topic, React Native versus native, let's discuss the pros and cons of each. For the sake of simplicity, I'll be sticking to just Android and iOS since they are the most popular platforms available. We'll be comparing React Native versus native based on three parameters. One is the number of developers or the languages that needs to be known while developing. Second is the time, and third is the performance. Starting with the number of developers, if you are to consider native mobile application development, you need separate developers to develop in Android platform as well as for the iOS platform. Also, they need to know Kotlin or Java to develop in Android and Objective-C or Swift to develop in iOS. Whereas in React Native, the developers need to know JavaScript to work with the React Native framework. Also have some good knowledge in the Android and iOS platforms. But then again, you are using a single framework to create applications for multiple platforms. So obviously, the number of developers that you require to develop applications using React Native is much less compared to the native mobile application development. Now let's consider the time taken for mobile application development. So if you're using the native mobile application development, it takes 2x the time since you're developing separately for the Android and iOS platforms. But using the React Native saves you the time and effort since you can use the single framework to develop for both the platforms. But then again, you are not getting like a 50% reduction since there are still you need to test for the Android devices and the iOS devices separately. Also, there are some edge cases where the Android and the iOS platform doesn't behave the same. So you need to write separate code for each. So considering these factors, still you get to reduce up to 30% of time in most of the cases. But performance, especially considering a lot of animations, is one parameter where the native mobile application development process scores above the React Native development process. React Native may be able to give you that native look and feel the same way that you when you develop native mobile applications, but still it needs to convert the JavaScript code to the native components. So there obviously will be some performance delays comparatively. Nothing that the end user may feel, but still, definitely the native mobile application development is comparatively better performant than the React Native development process. So, why should one consider React Native in their business? Well, the greatest advantage is the faster deployment of applications. Secondly, it takes you fewer developers to complete the project. Thirdly, since most of the business logic and the UI are the same, it takes fewer amount of effort and it's easier for maintenance and regression testing. Well, there are some edge cases where React Native may not be preferred. Like if you consider if you want application only for iOS, there's no point in using React Native. It's better to go for the native mobile application. Also, there are cases where if you're having lots of complex animations or you're using ARKit, it may be better to go with the native mobile application. But in most of the cases for simple or to medium scale mobile applications, it's preferable to go for the React Native as it saves you a lot of time and in turn saves you money.